or good afternoon, rather. As we're waiting for people to attend, I know that most of you who got on early have seen about this incredible dinner that we are hosting this year on November 19th in Washington, D.C., um, honoring my dear friend Musab Hussein Youssef, as well as Representative Elise Stefanik, who you remember from her line of questionings on the House Committee of Education and the Workplace to several college professors, leading to the resignation of two. Representative Jared Moskowitz from Florida, and Shabbos Kestenbaum, who, as you know, is suing Harvard University for the pervasive atmosphere of anti-Semitism on campus. If you'd like more information or to register, you can use this QR code, or you can go to info at Amet, M as in Mary, etonline.org. Thank you so, so much. Let's see how many people. As you know, the multi-front war that the Islamic Republic of Iran has launched upon Israel is now 361 days old. As all of you know, also since October 8th, Iranian-backed Hezbollah has launched more than 9,000 missiles upon the state of Israel, making it virtually unlivable for the citizens of Israel's north. Over the past year, the IDF has managed to sustain mighty blows to the Hamas infrastructure out of Gaza in the south. As they had been warning all along, the IDF has begun a campaign in Lebanon to uproot the Hezbollah infrastructure so that the people of Israel's north can once again live in safety and security. Virtually all of the top commanders of Hezbollah and its Radwan force have been eliminated by the IDF. Yesterday, as all of you know, Hezbollah's patron and sponsor, Iran, responded particularly to the death of the Hezbollah chieftain Hassan Nasrallah and lobbed 181 missiles into the Jewish state. Remarkably, no one was killed except for one unfortunate Palestinian citizen, although there was a simultaneous terrorist attack in the port of Jaffa that killed 7 Israeli citizens, which is very ironic to imagine that all the firepower of Iran did not kill anyone but one person, and a terrorist attack eliminated 7. How will Iran respond? And how will the United States, and most definitely, how will Israel respond? Will the mosaic of other ethnic minorities be able to step in and run the Lebanese government? As you know, my name is Sarah Stern, and I'm the founder and president of AMET, and it is our very esteemed pleasure to welcome our guest today, Dr. Walid Phares. Walid is an American scholar, analyst, and expert born in Beirut. Dr. Phares is a highly sought-after speaker who is a regular analyst on Newsmax and appears frequently on Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, Al Arabiya, Al Jazeera, Al Sharq, and France 24, and has published at least 8 excellent books that I'm aware of. Dr. Phares is an engaging and highly, highly sought-after Middle East scholar and pacesetter, often predicting trends and situations on the ground years before they occur. He has been a Fox News terrorism expert and is now a Newsmax Foreign Policy analyst. He has co-launched 2 recent projects: Educate America, a platform to help reform U.S. education about the Middle East and counter disinformation in the classroom, and War and Freedom, Insights Talk, a podcast available on YouTube. Dr. Phares served as an advisor to the U.S. Congress and the European Parliament, and has also served as an advisor on foreign policy to former President Donald Trump and as a national security senior advisor to the presidential campaign of Mitt Romney in 2012. Dr. Phares is the only expert and author who predicted the Arab Spring a year before it occurred in his book that I loved, The Coming Revolution, Struggle for Freedom in the Middle East, that was published by Simon & Schuster in 2010. His book, Future Jihad, Terrorist Strategies, has predicted the spread of the jihadi ideology worldwide, and his other book, The Lost Spring, has accurately predicted the Iranian and jihadist strategies. His latest book, Iran, an Imperialist Republic and U.S. Policy, has exposed the transaction between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the U.S. administration. Dr. Phares holds an extensive CV and has so many noteworthy achievements in the fields of academia, government, media, and publishing, and critical advice on combating terrorism and counter-jihadi radicalization, both Sunni and Shiite, and both stateside and abroad. And it is a profound honor and pleasure, as always, to have Dr. Phares with us. Walid, you've advised two presidential candidates, including President Trump in 2015 to 2016. You were his first announced policy advisor. You've also advised members of Congress and the European Parliament, and for 2 decades have briefed many national security agencies. And equally important, you are a native of Beirut and lived through the 15-year war and have published extensively throughout these years. Can you draw the important geopolitical and historical context of the various Lebanese reactions to Israel's war with Hezbollah and the potential Israeli operations inside Lebanon?
Thank you, Sarah, very much, first of all, for this invitation. It's not the first one. We have been working together for decades since we were kids. No, I'm kidding. So, and I'm always happy to come back. Emet really is one of the leading organizations, foundations that is doing a major battle, the battle of re-education. Because our educational system, you just mentioned one of my projects now, which I'm co-leading, aims at basically correcting the information in the classroom. And what we have seen over this year since October 7 is just an evidence that US education needs massive, massive reform, especially with regard to the Middle East, specifically the jihadi Israel conflict. It's not anymore Palestinian Israel. It's way more than that. So again, thank you for inviting me. A little correction, I published 15 books, not 8. So hopefully soon 16. Let me do this, since you asked me to, a broad question, and then we could go into some of the files and the directions. There is a very specific, long, comprehensive history of Israel's relationship with Lebanon. And when we say Lebanon, you have various components who are players inside Lebanon. You have the Christians, the Sunni, the Druze, the Shia, and you have political parties inside them, etc. And you have decades. So basically, the first encounter between Israel and Lebanon was freshly independent in 1943. It's made of all these communities I have just mentioned. It was 100 countries, successful economically, but it had a problem of identity. Most of the Christians looked towards the identity of the West. Most of the Muslims at the time looked towards Arab Islamism, which is embedded in Lebanon's historic questions. But it worked well. There were no wars since the armistice was signed between the Arab countries and Israel after the War of Independence of Israel in 1948. So between 48 all the way to basically 1975, Lebanon sustained a quasi-peace with Israel, meaning there were no warm relationship, but there were no wars. Meanwhile, the Arabs in Egypt, Jordan, even Syria, other Arab countries or other radical Arab countries, Iraq, Libya, etc., were actually and technically and legally at war, including when the Arab League launched the PLO, which was the first transnational organization that the Palestinian nationalists, I would say the Arab nationalists in the West Bank and Gaza, have launched. Now, Arab countries, one after the other, signed peace treaties with Israel. The famous Camp David Accord, the Wadi Arba Accord for Jordan. Egypt was the first one, then Jordan came after, and then other countries. So the global Arab states were going into signing these agreements. That was the first wave, way before the Abraham Accord. And then throughout the Cold War, they stopped. There were no wars. The countries that were either ruled or controlled by a militia that was funded and organized by the Khomeinist regime, which is basically the Islamic regime in Iran. I will use Islamic regime interchangeably with the Khomeinists. I'm not using Iran because there is an opposition in Iran. So those radical forces maintained a line of confrontation with Israel. What is Hamas? What is Hezbollah? What are the Houthis in Yemen? Or Hashd forces in Iraq? All these countries, which little by little and gradually fell under the control of the mothership being Tehran's regime, the Khomeinist regime, they maintained a state of war with Israel. And on top of that, there were 3 or 4 actors, terrorist actors, who remain actively launching operations against Israel. And I will single out 2 of them. Hamas, as we all know, so we don't need to go into the details, they have never stopped a war with Israel. And when they were actually in control of Gaza, we all know and remind everybody that Gaza was actually abandoned by Israel after the peace process starts, so that Israel will prove that they're not occupiers. It fell under the control briefly of the PA, the Palestinian Authority, in 2005. But in less than 2 years, Hamas conducted a coup, bloody coup, killing hundreds and hundreds of Fatah members and PLO. And I'm mentioning this for a purpose which I'll get to, which is Israel in Lebanon. So Hamas has never stopped its jihadism, ever. And the result was the genocidal attack on October 7 last year against Israel, and the rest is history that we have lived, all of us. To the north, another organization, which is Hezbollah, that has been gradually taken over Lebanon over decades. They started, and people always ask me on campuses in the media, when did Hezbollah start? Don't be mistaken. Hezbollah started immediately after the coup in Iran that brought about the Khomeinist regime. So the argument was Hezbollah is a resistance against Israeli occupation and invasion. Not at all. Listen to this. Hezbollah is a militia which was funded and organized by the representatives of the Khomeinist regime with the help of Assad at the end of 1980. That's 2 years before the Israeli invasion. And then when the Israelis came in to push back the PLO and remove it from their northern borders all the way to Beirut, Hezbollah was already sitting in northern Bekaa. So this is an important point about the propaganda.
Yes. It looks like Walid might be frozen. I would like to add just
Hezbollah that we are a resistance movement. No. You were there before. Israel defeated the PLO. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
All
yes.
right.
Okay.
So let me take it from there on. Now we have Lebanon, mostly since 1990. A big event occurred that would impact Israel later. In 1990, the Assad regime, Hezbollah, and their militias did a coup inside Lebanon. They brought down the free government of Lebanon, and they seized the army of Lebanon. So as of 1990, the old quasi-free Lebanon, half Western Lebanon ceased from existing. There was only a band in the southern part of the country known as the Security Zone, which was defended by a local force called the SLA, South Lebanon Army. That's from 1990 till 2000. So there was 1 decade where all of Lebanon, minus that security zone, was controlled by the Ba'ath and by Hezbollah, right? And they transformed Lebanon, its laws, and they suppressed all the other Lebanese who were disarmed except Hezbollah. Now, during that decade, unfortunately, the southern Lebanese were too small. The United States, especially later on under the Clinton administration, did not want to help like they've helped elsewhere around the world. And in 2000, the second major event was the withdrawal of the Israelis from southern Lebanon under pressure by Washington. And that was a choice made by, at the time, Prime Minister Ehud Barak. And the hope was that Hezbollah will not enter that area. There was UN promise that Hezbollah will not enter. And as you can expect, Hezbollah entered the area. Nevertheless, there was a new status quo, and Israel accepted, okay, now Hezbollah is at the border, but we have the UNIFIL force, UN. You know, who would trust any institution once Hezbollah is on the ground? So from 2000 till most recently, I would say all the way till the October 7 massacre, it was manageable. The north was manageable. There were some attacks. Hezbollah would do attacks. There were even short wars, as in 1996, Hezbollah conducted a war, and then the Israelis would respond and then, you know, eliminate the threat from the air, no serious ground operation. And again, a third event occurred that could have helped, but it didn't. In 2005, the Lebanese inside Lebanon rose. They called that revolt Cedar Revolution. That's in 2005. And it inspired many other players in the Middle East, including next door, 2 countries farther east in Iran. 4 years later, there was the Green Revolution in 2009 and many other uprisings throughout the so-called Arab Spring. But regarding back to Israel and Lebanon, as of 2005, one would say there is a force in Lebanon, non-armed, multi-sectarians, so it has Christians, Sunni, and Druze, all 3 components against Hezbollah, which was in control of mostly the Shia community. So there was something. And briefly, there was an independent cabinet government from 2005 till 2008. Then fate played its role. 2008, Hezbollah conducted its coup, the coup of May 2008, and they brought down that government and reasserted the role of the Islamic Republic and of their allies, and decided gradually to move back to the south and start to engage with the Israelis. Now, all of that equation continued despite multiple presidencies in the United States and multiple political directions. We had the end of the Cold War, we had 9/11, we had the Arab Spring, we had all these important benchmarks, but the Islamic regime of Tehran was capable of maintaining Lebanon into its orbit, and Hezbollah is the dominant force. Now, that was a quick history of the relationship between Israel and the various components. Now, I don't know if you want me to go from here, and I could talk about since October 7, if you have any question for this part, or I could go to since October 7.
Okay. Okay. We were having a bit of a problem with the audio. I don't know where you left off, but I went through, I think, up until about 2008, 2009. And I'm so sorry, you might have to repeat a little bit of what you had just said.
I could do that if you want. So
Okay.
simple. In 2000, there was a new status quo. Hezbollah reached the international border. So now all of Lebanon is under the rule of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Between 2000 and 2005, something happened. The Lebanese tried to rise. And I'm saying this so that our audience understand that there are efforts made by unarmed Lebanese. And unfortunately, they have not been very successful or very proportionally successful. There was a free government for 2 years, 3 years, between 2005, 2008. Then Hezbollah, with the help of Tehran, took back the country, and now it's much tighter than ever before. So let's forget about any opposition coming from inside Lebanon till this war. We'll see what's going to happen. Now, those events will culminate with the operation of October 7. So I can take a bridge and then, walk with you over the events of October 7 and their implications on Lebanon, since time is important. Now, the first question we dealt with was why October 7? And that debate was in Israel and the Arab world and the United States. We've done a lot of work on it. But what we conclude with is that those who gave the orders to Hamas to conduct such, I call it, genocidal operation, are the same ones who ordered Hezbollah in Lebanon to start the bombing of Israel, Galilee and beyond. And the same one that gave the order to, as far as the South Red Sea, to the Houthis, to send their ICBMs. We knew it from day one. I knew it from day one. And of course, the Hashd and other militias in Syria and Iran. This is the Khomeinist empire, starting from Tehran, southern suburb in Beirut, all the way to Sana'a. And there were multiple goals. Sometimes we tend to forget them. Number one, Saudi Arabia and Israel were at the cusp of renewing the Abraham Accord. That would have been a huge achievement, basically, by the Saudis and Israelis to bring back the Abraham Accord, a stronger Abraham Accord. So to prevent that, Iran's regime told the organizations, go ahead. Now, there is a reason about the genocidal form that Hamas did. Hamas, on purpose, was physically, in an atrocious way, killing the Israeli civilians, mostly women and children and others. This was, in the writings I have been seeing, a decision by regime and Hamas to scare the Israeli people, to create divisions within the Israeli people, to create divisions here at home. And we saw the impact of 200 to 300,000 militants demonstrating from sea to shining sea with flags for Hezbollah and Hamas. And of course, they used the Palestinian flag. And the third reason was that the regime wanted to deflect attention from what was going on inside Iran, which was a full-fledged Iran revolution led by women. So in order to deflect that, because that is a threat against them, they wanted to open that front against Israel and shake off Israel and shake off the United States. Now, when Hamas did the operation, the Israelis didn't wait. They went into Gaza and started the warfare against Hamas. Here was a decision by Hezbollah. And in fact, in my view, the decision is not Hezbollah's, it's Tehran. It's the Grand Ayatollah. They decide and they move. These are troops and armies that belongs basically to the Khomeinist leader. So at this point in time, you have Hezbollah who starts a campaign, a bombing campaign, which used a very high number of missiles, ballistic and non-ballistic, Katyushas, and of course the drones. And what Hezbollah was able to do, and those among you who either were visiting Israel or live there or here, the goal was an exodus of population. And hundreds of thousands of Israelis had to leave their area. I mean, I know the Galilee very well. There is a large area in Israel in the north that is the largest width of Israel with an important population. If that population, is relocated or it goes into exodus, that would impact entire Israel. That would impact the demography, that would impact also the economy, so on. That was the goal of Hezbollah by bombarding. The Hezbollah also had developed a plan very similar to what Hamas has developed. And they agreed with the leadership in Tehran that when time will come, they would unleash the plan, which is in a sort that Hezbollah will bombard the Galilee heavily. There are a lot of targets there, will occupy the Israelis in the counters, and then will launch a commando operation very similar to Hamas. And probably the size of the operation in terms of troops will be double or triple. We're not talking about 1,500 or 1,200 jihadis. We're talking about 300 to 400. And Hassan Nasrallah, 3,000 to 4,000, excuse me. And Hassan Nasrallah has said, we have 100,000 fighters in Lebanon, and we can spare a few thousands to send them into the Galilee and capture citizens and bring hostages, a replica of what Hamas has done. Israeli intelligence, as far as we understood, realize that there is such a plan. So a Israel plan to go into Hamas and into Hezbollah and to deter them or destroy them was always there. This is not an issue of overnight thinking. So the Israeli government and their intelligence and the key persons knew about a plan to hit back against Hezbollah. Now, let me go to another point which will answer some of your initial questions. Lebanon did not react in the same way towards Hezbollah's waging war against Israel. Lebanon's wound was not healed. The contradictions inside Lebanon were still there, but the part of the Cedars Revolution that was against Hezbollah, that resisted Hezbollah, is unarmed. So they cannot, it will be like the Warsaw Uprising against the Nazis. And on top of it, unfortunately, under the Obama administration and under the Biden administration, there was not even a policy of engaging with the Lebanese opposition. They received technically very few Lebanese politicians who were against Hezbollah. So when the war started, they were areas inside Lebanon. Amanan just mentioned them. You could see them on the map that refused to support Hezbollah's war against Israel. And this time it's very different from the old conflict in Lebanon. This time you have a majority of 70% of the Lebanese who are, even before that war, opposed to Hezbollah. Hezbollah has assassinated prime ministers and members of parliament and teachers and students, officers of the army, of the Lebanese army for over 20 years. So certainly those neighborhoods, those communities, Sunni, Christian, Druze, who have had all these victims and all these targets by Hezbollah, refused that war. Not only refused that war, what happened over time is that Free Lebanese started to message Hezbollah that they don't want Hezbollah in their areas. They don't want them in their areas. And there were multiple incidents. And that was going into culmination. But let me say one point before we talk about the operation. Over 3 years before the Gaza attack, I call it the Hamas jihad against Israel in the Negev, there was multiple incidents in Lebanon between that 70% majority and Hezbollah's militias, incidents where we saw clearly that civilians were opposing the deployment of Hezbollah in their neighborhoods. There were even clashes, like in the Shuf area where the Druze are a majority, in that part of the Shuf area in the mountain, and there were clashes. Hezbollah used weapons and bombarded these areas. Hezbollah lost, by the way. And then you had Beirut, mostly West Beirut, majority of Sunni, that was invaded by Hezbollah. These are matters that most Americans and international public opinion doesn't know because our media is not good. It's not really revealing that there is more than half of Lebanon resisting Hezbollah. And most recently, over the past 3 years, there were incidents in Mount Lebanon and in the north. People were killed. So it was an explosive situation. When October 7 occurred, the Lebanese politicians were thinking what to do. Where can we be in this equation? So the minimum that we saw among the anti-Hezbollah politicians and coalitions and civil society is a warning to Hezbollah that this is not our war. We don't want to be part of it, and we oppose it. We want the UN to stop it, and we want you to, and that's important to end this section, to comply with a resolution. Now, everybody's heard about Resolution 1701 to separate Hezbollah from Israel.
I don't know if the speaker is frozen. He is on my side. Yes, we do know that UN Security Council Resolution 1701 of 2006 has been patently ignored. And UNIFIL was sent in. They're impotent, as is the Lebanese Armed Forces, or have been, with in comparison to the brute force of Hezbollah. Although we have seen that, the Israelis, the IDF has knocked out a great deal of the Hezbollah leadership. What remains to be seen is whether or not Hezbollah recruits without their leadership can still launch their missiles. What remains to be seen is how the United States is going to respond. The United States has brought more military might and power into the area. What remains to be seen, of course, is what Israel is going to do. Is Israel going to try to knock out the nuclear reactors? I doubt personally that they'll try to knock out the Iranian oil fields, because that will drive up the price of oil and further alienate the Jewish state from the hearts and minds of most people. Israel has a lot of cards to play it looks like, the help of the United States at this point. And we're waiting to resume with Walid. I'm so sorry about these technical difficulties. So we will see. I really apologize that he has disappeared right now. Let's see what is going on. Let's see. Let's catch him. Walid is really our expert, and I apologize profusely about this. So, Walid. Okay, Walid is going to reconnect. I really apologize about this. Thank you so much for hanging on. For those of you that have, Walid is a treasure, and he is going to expand. And I think he will discuss how the Sunni Arab nations are responding to this, and what Iran might do to counter Israel moving into Lebanon, and the risks of the operation in Lebanon, and possibly what is the position of the current administration. So there are a lot of questions to be answered. So we're waiting for Walid to reconnect. And thank you so much to our listeners for hanging on. Okay, you are reconnected.
I am here. I'm sorry.
Okay, so go ahead. So at this point, how do you think Israel is going to respond? How do you think the United States is going to respond? And what do you think Iran will do to counter Israel's engagement in Lebanon?
Well, first of all, the Israeli operation to eliminate 2 layers, maybe 3 layers of leadership inside Hezbollah, and the waves of bombardment that Israel has conducted over the southern suburb, which is the headquarters of Hezbollah, has disoriented the militia. It's disoriented. So Israel has now more time. It has also aborted the Hezbollah operation decided with the regime against the northern Galilee. And if Israel continues to push, we don't know how far they're going to push, at least on the ground, then there is a chance that a large number of the internal displaced Israelis will be back to the upper Galilee. Having said that, Hezbollah still has a large body of fighters in the south. And those fighters in the south, if Israel decides to move in a frontal way, they will fight, there will be casualties. Of course, they wouldn't be able to stop Israel, but it's the issue of casualties. However, what we heard from some analysts on the ground is that the local populations in the south may find an opportunity to at least keep their areas safe, meaning without any Hezbollah. And that is something that could open the path for the Israelis to reconstitute a security safe zone from the Hermon mountain all the way to Rosh Hanikra or Ras al-Nakura in Arabic. That would be a width of 3, 5, 6, 7 kilometers. And Israelis would not need a lot of troops in those areas. Now with the capabilities they've established, drone and long range targeting. So that's one option. The other option would be that the Israeli forces would cut off the south of Lebanon without invading it from the Bekaa. Why the Bekaa? Because the Bekaa is the natural path for Hezbollah to reach Syria, where they have reserves, and to reach Iraq, where they have militia allied to them, and to reach mothership in Iran. So these are the two options that the Israelis so far, they may have more options, but so far they have. And it looks like Israel now at this point in time seeks to end the problem. And ending the problem is not going to be a ceasefire. Everybody goes back to where they came from. It doesn't even end with a new Security Council resolution. It will end by creating facts on the ground that would deny Hezbollah or other than Hezbollah to approach the border again. And let me end with one point. The real element of change that could help resolve the issue of Hezbollah and even bring Lebanon back to a state of peace, and more than peace, Abraham Accord signing, will have to have the Lebanese themselves rise and then isolate Hezbollah. Israel defends itself. It has its own strategy. Even the US, all of our leaders have told Israel, you do what you need to do to protect yourself. That's protection and defense. But a solution for the problem inside Lebanon, it needs the Lebanese and it needs also the international coalition.
So, Walid, what do you expect the response from Iran is going to be? We already saw 181 missiles lobbed into Israel yesterday.
We need to expect that the regime there will not allow the complete defeat of Hezbollah, because next it will be Assad, next it will be the militias inside Iraq. Each country, I call them the colonies, the vassal states of the regime in Iran, they have opposition inside their borders, meaning in Lebanon, you have 70% of the population against Hezbollah. In Syria, you have a lot of percentage. We don't know because Syrians have been sent into exodus, but at least 50% of the population against the regime, if not more, and against Hezbollah. In Iraq, the north is already Kurdish. They are autonomous on their own. But even inside the Shia community of Iraq, remember, fall of 2019, there were uprising demonstrations. The youth in all these countries, they don't want the lifestyle, they don't want the ideology of the Ayatollah. So all what is going to take is that Hezbollah, because it's the main organization, will be contained and even maybe reversed inside Lebanon, and you'll have a chain event like Eastern Europe. You know, after the changes that took place in the Soviet Union, it's one after the other. They started to fall and then democracies to rise.
Walid, I have seen videos of young Lebanese Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, who are indoctrinated, and they, young kids as young as 6 years old, to march in unison with weapons. This is supposed to be the Boy Scouts. And how easy would it be, or difficult, challenging, to knock out this sort of indoctrination that so many of the Lebanese youth have had? Will it arise? Last week we had a lieutenant colonel from the IDF retired who said he feels in another 20 years Hezbollah might arise again. What are your predictions for Lebanon?
If a change, the way we see it, occurs, there will be no 20 years anymore. But if a change doesn't occur, it will keep reoccurring, the jihadi ideology. We as Americans are also responsible for that. There are no geographical indoctrination of jihad. It's universal. It's online. The money that we send to the regime, the $150 billion plus more, a slice of it is being used in indoctrination. We call it jihadization. This is one of the reasons why in the beginning I mentioned that I am co-launching with my colleagues a platform to reform, to wage the ideological battle. But the ideological battle is very specific to make sure that the classroom is not hijacked by the jihadist ideology, is not hijacked by the propagandists. And to tell you the truth, it's as true here as it is in Lebanon or in the rest of the Middle East. So it's going to have a political change in Lebanon. If Lebanon is still occupied by this Khomeini's militia, it's going to be hard. But if there is a free space in Lebanon, and I would encourage the participants to have the good news, at least, that it will be easier in the Christian Druze areas. They won't need a lot of efforts because they have been occupied by that force. It will be not as easy in the Sunni areas because of the jihadists and the Muslim Brotherhood, but it's feasible. With what Saudi Arabia's reforms are doing with the UAE and Egypt, those are the big guys in the Sunni world, and those can influence the classroom in any Sunni area in the Middle East. The issue is going to be with the Shia community, not with them as Shia, but because Hezbollah, with the funding from Tehran, which, by the way, is the funding we are sending, which is crazy. We are sending funding. It's been used by the mothership and then by all these militias to radicalize those kids. And therefore, yes, one has to expect every 10 years, 12 years, a new generation. But in Lebanon, if all Lebanese who are opposed to Hezbollah, 70%, with the international community, are able to weaken Hezbollah and to uproot it militarily speaking, then a post-Hezbollah government, free government, made of all these communities, should be in charge of the Ministry of Education, should be able to clean up that classroom, which is basically a jihadi classroom. And that's a project for 3 to 4 years from day Hezbollah will be dismantled.
So it is true that Iran, as it stands today, against the brave dissident population, the Islamic Republic controls all the weapons. I don't know exactly at this point how many weapons Hezbollah has after Israel has knocked out a sufficient amount in the last 2 weeks or so. But do you feel that the Lebanese people that are not influenced by Hezbollah and the Iranian people that are not influenced by the Islamic Republic can actually rise up?
Yeah, they showed us this. I mean, I just mentioned that in 2005, there was the Cedars Revolution. It was worse. It was not just Hezbollah. It was the Syrian army, meaning the Assad army, completely occupying Lebanon. Nobody paid attention to the Lebanese. And after the assassination of then, the late Hariri, we saw 1.2 to 1.4 million Lebanese in a nation of 5 million on the streets. That's the reason why the Bush administration called it the Cedars Revolution. The problem is that as of 2008, what happened? There was a change of policy in the United States in 2009. Then President Obama addressed the demonstrations that took place in Iran against the regime and said, we are not going to intervene, we're not going to meddle. When you have that position, it will be read by the jihadi regimes that they are offering us, these countries, that we can do anything we want. That's why, to answer really the question, both in Lebanon, since you asked about the uprising in Lebanon. Yeah, there are people who have been involved in the opposition. In Iran, I mean, they've done 3-4 revolutions. The last one, the Masa Amini revolution, is still ongoing. The problem is the attitude of decision makers in Washington. I mean, exactly last year, the Biden administration sent $6 billion to the regime. What can regular people on the streets do against what $6 billion can do? And it's not just that they have the weapons, that they have it, but they have the influence, they have the lobbies, they have it. And they were so much on steroid, that regime and Hezbollah, that they thought maybe we could even attack Israel. They made a mistake on the historical level. This is a big mistake, but they thought, well, America is with us, the administration is with us, the Europeans are allowing this, they are sending us money, so they will never go against us. They will never support the opposition, and that's the big mistake. So what needs to be done is a change of policy. This week, I was speaking at a major Iran conference in Washington, D.C., and I said, well, you have 3 things you need to do in Washington. Number one, you need a president, hopefully a next president or the next president, to address the Iranian people directly, to talk with them, as Reagan has done for the peoples of the Soviet Union and Eastern, because once you have that, then you have an encouragement. You have some sort of mobilization among the population. And the people, they can do a lot if they have this moral backing. We're not talking about more than moral. Second, they need to invite and engage the various components of the Iranian opposition. We've seen Afghans sitting in the Oval Office under some administrations. We've seen Zarif, we've seen all of these people, ballading in New York. Where are the oppositions? Where is the opposition? It should be received in Congress, it should be received here. Thirdly, Sarah, we need to stop the transfer of billions of dollars. I mean, this is suicidal. We are sending billions and they are reinvesting them against us. And there's a long list of things that we can do before even considering an action against that regime military. And to answer your question, yes, there is a huge potential in Iran, in Lebanon, but also in Syria and in Iraq, and I would even move to say in Yemen. Southern Yemen is secular. Southern Yemen is free. They are the ones who are blocking the Houthis from taking over all of Yemen and attacking Saudi Arabia. We need to change the architecture of US policy. That would be my opinion.
Okay. If push comes to shove, do you believe that America might exercise some of its military might to help Israel? We know that they are bringing aircraft carriers into the region. They're increasing their troop level in the region. What do you believe?
Look, this is complex, but I'm going to try to summarize it for the sake of time. First of all, we look at what administration are we talking about. When you send carriers under one administration is different from carriers under a different administration. So the minimum that this administration till January 20th will do, either if it's Biden still in charge before November 5 or the 20th, or if it's going to be a Kamala Harris administration. That's, in my view, the worst case scenario. They will grant Israel means to defend itself if attacked. So if there are missiles, incoming missiles, and there are incoming drones, they've said it, CENTCOM said it, etc. But they will use that help to put pressure on who? On Israel, to sign ceasefires both in Gaza and in Lebanon, and to eventually sit down with the same jihadi organizations as it has done with the PLO, although these are two different things, or with Sadat. Sadat was a man of peace at the end. So they want to force Israel. They'll tell them, we will protect you from incoming, but you're going to start sitting down with those jihadists, and eventually you're going to accept their conditions of two-state solution. One of the states is jihadi. So there will be a conditioned help, but they will not help Israel if Israel has to go beyond its borders as it's doing today in Lebanon, or go and strike the regime capacities and capabilities in Iran. They said it. They're not going to help them. But yes, they will have a kind of a dome. If it's a different administration, and now we have two options. No, there is no third. If it's a Trump administration, they've already said it. The campaign said it. And when they were in charge, they said it. They will be in full solidarity with Israel, which means actually whatever Israel needs to do, there will be an administration that will back them up. Of course, they will sit down with them at the table of negotiations after the terrorist forces are defeated. Yes, it will be like after Nazi Germany, they're going to be an international conference and the administration will help. So the difference, I have to say it now, in public, is night and day. The results of what's going to happen in November in terms of the choice is not on foreign policy, but the results on foreign policy are going to be night and day.
Right, right. And we have seen time and time again in the history of the Middle East that diplomacy is not a substitute for victory. Negotiation without military power or military strength actually just is appeasement of evil. And there's no other way to put this. We have seen appeasement, and we have seen, the real forces of evil, the Sunni and the Shiite terrorists, who have monopolized really too much of the map of the Middle East for far too long, in conjunction with their friends in China and Russia, really being empowered and emboldened by appeasement. Appeasement never works in the Middle East, and I can't remember any time in history where appeasement has worked with,
I agree with you totally. I mean, this is the difference between Munich, and we know what happened in Munich. That was Western policy of appeasement of the Nazis, even the French, British, everybody. And Brussels. Brussels is the launching of NATO. So these are the two choices. In this case right now, what this administration is trying to encourage players in the Middle East is to do a Munich. Give the regime more, give them money, give them recognition, etc., etc. While what Israel is trying to do now, backed by more than half of Americans, maybe more, is actually to get the region to become a Middle Eastern NATO. They want to expand the Abraham Accord. They want to work with the Arab coalition. These are not dreams. We saw the reality. So the battle now between Israel on the one hand and their friends and allies in the United States and in Europe, and on the other hand, the Khomeinist regime and Hezbollah and Hamas and all other jihadists is a worldwide battle. It's not just local. It's not just on the Lebanese border or Gaza border. It's playing the big role for the future of humanity.
Right, right. So this is not just about Israel, as we keep stressing. This is about Western civilization as we know it. And I think we have time from some more questions from the audience. One question was, what are the pluses or minuses of Israel attacking the Iranian oil fields?
We are so divided in Washington, but we all, I mean, those who are conscious of the threat of the regime, they want that regime to be changed, to be given an action and access to the Iranian people. That's the bottom line. Now, some of us, including Senator Graham, right, he is talking about targeting the oil fields. Others are talking about targeting the nuclear facilities. A third dimension is saying you don't need to destroy these industries because they will be used by the Iranian people. What you need to do is to target the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, the Pasdaran, Sepa Pasdaran, because those are the nerve of the regime. These are the SS of the regime. So if you target them, what would happen, argue, that third school of thought is that the Iranian people will rise. If they wake up and see what Israel has done, to Hezbollah or to Hamas happening in Iran, right? This is not a call for war, it's for resistance. There will be no nerves anymore to have the police crashing or, subduing the population. The police cannot, actually the police may shift and actually the army of Iran may shift. So the real difference is going to be the
I don't know if it's on everybody else's screen, but while it seems to have frozen on my screen a bit. Um, so I'm so sorry that this video seems to be a little choppy. Um, but yes, yeah, Israel has many very, very, very important decisions to make. And we certainly hope that Israel has the offensive capability after being involved in a war for 12 months in Gaza to be able to take on Hezbollah in the north and possibly Iran all alone. Um, so I will see if we could get Walid back. I'm sorry about this. Okay. So, Walid, we'll reconnect. Thank you so much for hanging on. I really apologize about this audio and these audio and visual difficulties today. Um, but as we see, you know, Israel is actually fighting for all of us. Ah, here we go. Yes. Okay. So you were discussing the pluses and the minuses of attacking the oil fields, and you could also talk about Israel's capability to um, attack their nuclear facilities and set Iran back.
Yes, well, I've deployed three doctrines now in Washington, D.C. One that says destroy the oil refineries, they will stop all these attacks, but that is limited by votes at the United Nations by Russia and China, and then pressures to a ceasefire, so on and so forth, especially if it's this administration. Second, an attack against the nuclear program, but that leaves basically the rest of the army and the missiles intact. What remains is the third theory, which all exclude military on the ground. There are no military on the ground theory here, would be to target with the same method that Israel has done in Lebanon against those militias, all the militia positions that are the nerve center of the regime. So nobody will be touched except those Pasdaran, Sepa, Pasdaran, IRGC. And the opposition is telling us that if that force, the SS, would crumble, if the headquarters would crumble, or even with warnings, there will be a revolution nobody could stop, because the police will not go against the population. They will actually walk with the population. And there are also information that says that the army that has never done anything, it was always the Revolutionary Guard, large segments of the army would walk with the youth, with women, with minorities, and change that regime. So this may be the silver bullet, is to, instead of investing in oil or in nuclear, which is a deterrence, and it would work as a deterrence, but the brain will be still there, and the forces will be still there. But if it's you hit the nerve of the system, then everything will collapse, like in science fiction movies.
Let's hope. Well, we did see since September 17th things that were greater than a James Bond movie
Oh,
in
yes.
terms of in terms of what Israel was able to, in a very, very clean and precise way execute. And we're hoping that the good Lebanese people that Walid represents so beautifully and has for so long will be able to rise up against this arm of the Iranian octopus, um, Hezbollah, and inshallah, we will continue to have victory without too many innocent casualties, please God. Um, I do want to put in a word for Ahmet. In a world where members of Congress, unfortunately, get multiple messages from even some Iranian Islamic Republic backed think tanks that are well disguised. People depend on folks like us at Ahmet and wonderful people like Walid Phares to give accurate facts and analysis for critical policy decisions about the Middle East. We have support from respected scholars and thought leaders such as Dr. Walid Phares, and we are on the front lines daily trying to educate timely, nonpartisan education on Capitol Hill. So please support our efforts to make successful, impactful changes, especially now during this critical time of war, to fight the battle of ideas on Capitol Hill. And if you can, please come to our dinner on November 19th. If you'd like more information about that, please just go to info@ametonline.org. Our speakers are amazing, with Mossab Hassan Youssef, the son of the founder of Hamas, Representative Elise Stefanik, Representative Jared Moskowitz, and Shabazz Kestenbaum. And hopefully Walid Phares will join us as one of our esteemed guests. Thank you all so much for joining us today. And I do apologize about the technical difficulties. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
And for all of our Jewish members, Shana Tova.